want you to take a look at this. The U.S. Navy just released new images of the Chinese spy balloon that they recovered in the waters off of South Carolina. It's pretty, this is really intriguing to see. This balloon, of course, shot down by the military over the weekend. Also happening right now, the House Armed Services Committee is holding a hearing on the threats that China poses to the United States. And CNN has learned exclusive details about the intelligence failures that led to the Pentagon not detecting Chinese incursions during the Trump administration. Let's get over to Oren Lieberman. He's at the Pentagon for us. Oren, what are you learning?
So I was watching the beginning of the House Armed Services Committee here, and it's worth pointing out that although this was scheduled before this latest Chinese balloon was discovered, it has certainly been a topic of conversation. And the chairman of the committee said you'd have to be naive not to realize that this was intentional by China in an attempt to spy on the United States. In terms of what we're learning, last year in April, there was a report from the Air Force called People's Republic of China High Altitude Balloons, and CNN has reviewed parts of this report. The report itself documents a case in 2019 where a balloon flew all the way around the world, flying near Hawaii, overflying parts of southern Florida during the Trump administration. Now, it's crucial to point out that what's unclear from this report is when the U.S. realized it was a Chinese surveillance balloon, and the Pentagon believed that that was the intent behind the balloon. And that gets at another point here that the Pentagon said yesterday. General Glenn Van Herk, the commander of Northern Command and NORAD, said there was what he called an awareness gap that allowed China to fly balloons, surveillance balloons, he said, over the continental United States 3 times during the Trump administration without the U.S. knowing it. It was only later, Jake Sullivan said, the national security advisor, when the U.S. went back and looked at the data and the trajectories of these balloons that they came to believe these were surveillance balloons. That gap there is what the U.S. is trying to close now, especially as it now has the balloon in hand, or at least parts of it as we saw from the images there, and is working to recover the rest of it. Kate?
Oren, thank you so much. The FBI's lab, for those, as we've been seeing these images, what's being recovered in those images, the FBI is now analyzing some of the debris recovered from the downed spy balloon. Carlos Suarez has more on this for us from South Carolina. Carlos, what's the latest from there?
Kate, so we are at an area about 21 miles north of the main debris site off the coast of South Carolina, where in the last few minutes it's become quite clear that the Navy and the FBI are starting to make preparations to possibly bring some of that debris to this location here. It is a boat ramp as well as a parking lot to the north of where the search is taking place. It's where for the past 3 days the Navy has pre-positioned a lot of their equipment, a lot of their personnel. It's where we found a number of boats being brought in this morning, along with some heavy equipment as well as some oxygen tank. An FBI agent earlier today told us that they were securing this site in the event that they might have to bring some of that debris out here. In the last few minutes, we've seen floodlights being brought out, as well as a forklift and what appears to be some storage containers. Now, in the main debris search site off the coast of South Carolina, which is about a half-hour drive from where we are right now, we're told that crews have been using equipment to essentially scan the bottom of the ocean there to get a sense of exactly how much of this debris is still left there. Once they get that done, then they're going to start the work of lifting all of that debris out onto a ship and then most likely bring it out here or up to Virginia. Kate?
Carlos, thank you. Joining me now for more on this is James Clapper, the former director of national intelligence, of course, under President Obama. It's good to have you, Director Clapper. I want to put up, and I know you can see this, put up these images that we're just now getting in from the U.S. Navy, because I think they're fascinating of some of what is being pulled in, a really much closer up look at what they're recovering from this Chinese spy balloon. We will put those images up when we get them. What do you see here?
Well, it looks to me, Kate, like this is part of the larger dirigible, if you will, the balloon structure itself. What's really crucial, of course, is the payload. That is the sensor suite that was being carried by the balloon itself. So this is a good sign because this would indicate, hopefully, where this was going on is in relatively close proximity to the payload, which is the key thing you want to get here to analyze just what was the sensor suite, what were the Chinese actually trying to do, and what were they trying to collect with this balloon.
Absolutely right. And to the another big question that's now being raised with some of the new reporting, as Oren Lieberman was just discussing about previous incursions, and what the commander of U.S. Northern Command is now saying about these previous incursions by Chinese balloons, that they went undetected because, and the way he described it was a domain awareness gap. What does that mean to you?
Yeah. Well, that's a sort of military jargon for, we missed it. There is, I think, a kind of a gray netherworld between the altitudes at which conventional aircraft normally fly, say 40,000 feet and below, and then where we have pretty good coverage. We can detect aircraft and other vehicles in that regime, 40 or 50,000 feet and below. And then with respect to spacecraft, we do a pretty good job of tracking them. But there's a gray area. That's not actually the color, but there's an area there where we don't apparently have a good technical collection capability to track objects in that zone of altitude, if you will. So I think that's what's afoot here, and I'm sure we can bring to bear the resources over time to correct this deficiency, this domain awareness gap, to use the phrase.
Yeah, I'm going to try to work that into conversation more often, I guess. You had said this weekend, Director Clapper, that you tend to believe China's explanation that this balloon had gone off course. Can you tell me more about that? When you say that, do you mean that you believe that this is not a spy balloon?
No, I didn't mean to imply that at all, Kate. What I meant, I think the Chinese may have been truthful about it wandering off course. I don't think they've been truthful about what the sensor suite on it. I think it was clearly for intelligence collection purposes. I've had some experience with, in my time in the Intelligence Committee, with operating balloons for intelligence collection, and they can be effective, but you are, of course, subject to the vagaries of weather, fog, mist, rain, and in this case, most critically, wind. And that's, by the way, is one of the interesting things I hope we can learn, is just how much control the Chinese may or may not have had over the flight path of this balloon.
Fascinating. Director Clapper, thank you for your time.